Hello and welcome to Erich McElroy's American Exchange with me, Erich McElroy. I think it's always good to clarify that just in case anyone's confused. Thank you for any new listeners and thank you for those that are coming back. This is the podcast where me, Erich McElroy, I don't need to say my whole name every single time, reach back across the pond from here in England to find out what is happening in my home country of the United States of America. This week we are again with friend of the pod, Brian Karem. Brian is a White House correspondent and reporter. He's been doing that beat for many, many years. We've had him on a lot before. He's now a columnist for Salon magazine and also has his own incredible podcast called Just Ask the Question. Has written a book as well, which is really worth checking out, called Free the Press. I really enjoy talking to Brian, because he doesn't pull any punches and he says it exactly like he sees it, which is great because he's been doing this for a long time and has very strong views about the role of journalists. So it's pretty clear who he maybe likes or doesn't like, but when it comes to his journalism, that comes first. And the way he writes a story, if it required, a negative comment on Biden, he's going to do that. If it's a positive comment on Trump, he's going to do that, and the other way as well. Trump just gives a lot more to be negative about. But also, because Brian is in the White House press corps, he's been in the room with Biden. So I always like to check in with him and say, all this noise they say about Biden being completely unintelligent and unable to string a sentence together, is that true? And Brian answers that question in this podcast. So make sure to check out his podcast, his book, all of those things. I'll hit those again at the end, but thank you for listening. And please welcome back to the podcast, Brian Karem. Well, I'm excited to welcome back one of the originals of American Exchange, Brian Karem. It's lovely to see you again, even
Good to see
though
Eric.
the politics of the moment. I mean, this has been, this is weekly we do this, and this week has been insane, both for court cases that are happening, um, the stuff in Georgia that's going on. It's difficult to keep up, especially for people who are maybe not paying attention all the time. With all of the madness going on, what do you think has been the standout in the last 7 minutes of the political campaign, or at least the
The
last few days?
the dissident in Russia who was found dead in his cell.
Yes, that's just broke
That's
today.
probably that just broke recently. That's huge news, and I hope for all the Putin lovers in the United States puts them on point and lets them know exactly what Putin is all about. And then the day before, the big news was that Russia is trying to develop space-based satellite killing missiles against treaty. Those are the ones that really matter. And then the United States, we have our third world concerns, Donald Trump going to trial, Donald Trump losing his money, Donald Trump driving to New York, and they have that on video like it's the coronation. We seem to be Donald Trump all the time, all Donald Trump news all the time. And it's been that way since he left office. It was that way when he was in office. And the current resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, President Joe Biden, doesn't seem to get that he's being outdone when it comes to putting his name out there and taking up some of the oxygen in the room. He's let Donald Trump take all the oxygen.
Yeah, not just some, but all. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that in the American political conversation, is the Russian stuff going to have any legs? Will people care? Does it matter about Navalny?
It does. Of course it matters. Will it resonate with the American populace? Probably not so much. But the important thing is that it doesn't need to resonate with the American populace or the voters right now. It needs to resonate in government.
Mm.
And John Kirby, a national security spokesperson, has said that it has resonated. Of course, the White House is paying close attention to what Russia is doing. And they're also paying close attention to what Putin is doing with Trump, which is, one traitor nuzzling up to is the puppet of a despot. So there you go. That's where it is in America with Putin and Russia.
But obviously, well, at the moment, for people who aren't following this, so legislation-wise, the money to support Ukraine has been tied up in knots by Republicans who just keep adding strings to it, almost as if they're working for Putin themselves. and there's a bill that's left the Senate, is waiting for the House. But do you think news of Russians putting, nuclear satellites in the air, Russians killing the lead opposition leader, do you think that will shift the conversation and get the House to do anything?
I think it might shift it enough to get 5 or 6 votes needed to pass the legislation. Will
Right.
it resonate with the MAGA crowd? No. And let's be honest, if you're in England and let me explain it in terms you can understand. We have 2 parties in this country. One is the Democratic Party, the other is not the Republican Party, it's the MAGA Party. It
Mm,
is all MAGA all the time. It's Republican in name only. It has none of the ideals of the old Republican Party. It has all the trappings of a cult run by Donald Trump. So they'll tell you there's a crisis on the U.S. border that has to be solved today, yet they won't pass legislation that will help solve the problem. They'll
yeah.
blame the Democrats. And those who belong to the cult will, run along and believe Donald Trump. And that's the problem in this country, is that he has dissolved the fine line between fiction and fact. And so that your fiction can now become a fact. And
Mm.
that's just not the way the real world works, but it's the way the Trump world works.
But do you think that, so this is, part of the reason I started this podcast 3 years ago, I guess, was to get a sense of what's happening on the ground. Because I'm not there, talking to people like you who are not only there as
Mm-hmm.
a person, but also as a journalist, which are people too. But you get the dual function.
Occasionally, that's
But also because and I'm going to come to this in a second about, being in the White House and being around, um, Biden and all those things. But is so from here, obviously, you and I are, news junkies, you by profession, me because I'm a geek who can't do sports. Um, that for us, Donald Trump has never gone away. He stayed in our presence. We've been paying attention to him politically. But for the average typical person, it feels like the normal person who kind of tunes out politics 99% of the time is just waking up and suddenly going, "Oh my God, this guy's still there and might actually be the nominee." Is
well,
that occurring?
I think look, the MAGA party has been telling us for the last year that it's inevitable that Donald Trump will be back in office. I remain unconvinced he'll be on the ballot in November
Mm,
because he's facing so many problems in court. Um, and he's not the healthiest of guys, and there are a lot of other things, but that could happen. But it's increasingly looking like he is inevitable to be the nominee, and we are
yeah.
destined for a Biden Trump rematch, which no one really wants to see. I mean, bottom
Mm,
line, if it were, I think most people, except for the Trumpers, except for the MAGA supporters, would love to see younger leadership in the United States. Or, as one man so succinctly put it, I'd like to have somebody around who's going to see the results of his decisions, who would live long enough to do that. And, I. I'm told that both of these men have the vim and vigor that necessary to do the job. I don't know how much more youthful a 40 or 50-year-old is, with vim and vigor, but probably has much more than an 80 or a 78-year-old, unless, of
yeah.
course, you're Keith Richards. And he wasn't born in the United States, so he can't be president. So most people would like to see a younger crop of people taking over. Unfortunately, we're being held hostage by the tail end of the baby boomers.
Yeah. But I mean, the reality of Trump, like most people think that he had gone away and now they're suddenly facing it going, "Oh shit, this is real. He is still here. He could be a legitimate, he's going to get the nomination and all of these things." Did most
See,
people, so I guess
I see
especially on the
that differently.
left, did most
I
people on the
see that.
left push it away and think it
Well,
wouldn't actually happen?
I don't see much difference between the far right and the far left, with this exception. The far left was in denial. The rest of us knew that Donald Trump wasn't going anywhere. He can't. He's
Hmm.
facing 91 felony charges in 4 different jurisdictions. He lost an $83 million defamation case that he's got to pay. Either
Yeah.
that or he's going to have to post an $83 million bond in order to appeal it. At the same time, he's facing maybe a loss of $450 million in Manhattan. He can't go away. He has
Hmm.
no income other than grifting his followers. So we all well knew that he wasn't going to go away. He's got to pay at least enough of his bills in order to get attorneys to represent him.
Yeah.
Although the quality of the attorneys that he's got to represent him is indicative of the amount of money that he's spending, zero.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone thought really that he was going to go away. There are a lot of people who wished he would go away. There are a lot of
Hmm.
people that continue to pray that he goes away, but he's never gone away. The only way he's like, to me, he's like a rabid New York City sewer rat trapped in a corner with a pizza in his mouth. He's not going away. He's fighting for that piece of pizza, and he will until the day he dies.
I would imagine there's some rats in New York City who would not want to be associated with Donald Trump, but I
Well,
understand
yeah, at
the
least the
analogy.
rats in New York City are are evolved.
And they would eat the slice of pizza with their hands, not with a knife and fork, because
Yeah,
they've got actual manners on how to eat a New York slice, which is as I'm married to a New Yorker, which
there you
makes me
go.
a New Yorker, I think I understand these things. Madness. Um, so yes, so they're inevitable at this stage. So you don't think he'll be on the ballot? So what? So we know now that the first criminal trial is
I
going to
think
start
there's
on
a
the 25th
chance
of
that
March.
yeah, the 25th of March will be the first case, and that's on the Stormy Daniels hush money case in New York,
Yeah.
which features Michael Cohen and a guy named David Pecker. I didn't make that name up. And that's they'll be talking about hush money paid to Stormy Daniels about an affair that Donald Trump claims he never had, though he claims he had, though he didn't have, and he don't want to talk about it. But
Yeah.
listen, Donald Trump's excuses for things are always the same. Didn't happen. It happened. It's a setup job. It did happen, but it didn't happen the way you think it happens. And oh, by the way, it's okay if it happens because I said it's legal for it to happen. That's what he said with Stormy Daniels, and by God,
Mhm.
that's exactly what he said about having the classified documents. That case when
Yeah.
that first came out, he said, "No, I don't have any classified documents." Then he said, "Well, if you search my place and you find them, the FBI planted them." Then he said, "Oh, yeah, I have them, but I gave them all back." And he said, "Oh, I have them and I'm keeping them and I can keep them because I made a magic mind meld and declassified them." So that's Donald Trump's, deflect, 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 deflect. And that probably will come home to roost in New York. He's going to make the case, or his attorneys will, that Michael Cohen can't be trusted because he's a convicted liar, and David
Mm.
Pecker is a piece of work, and so that they're going to try and push that. But I don't think anyone's buying it at this point because everything that's being said about Donald Trump is actually in on paper and in writing. So he's facing troubles in New York. After that, he also has the classified documents case, which I mentioned, and that's in Mar-a-Lago in Florida with a very considerate judge or
Mm.
sympathetic judge, and that's not going to go anywhere till after the election. And then you've got the insurrection case based around January 6th. That's in D.C. and that he's based his defense so far there on the case that he has total immunity and can do anything he wants, including as his attorney proposed in court, he could use SEAL Team 6 of the Navy to kill his opposition, and that'd be okay. So
Yeah.
the Supreme Court is going to probably rule soon on immunity. And then the other case that he's facing is the Georgia case, which looks to be falling apart before our very eyes. As Fonnie Willis came out and admitted that she had an affair with her lead prosecutor, and she stormed and around. And whatever happens there, she gave Donald Trump a lot of ammunition. She should have never stepped up and testified. But what can I tell you? I had two. I had two. My uncle and my grandfather, who were circuit court judges, and they
Mm.
always said lawyers made the worst witnesses because they don't know when to shut up.
Because she's the lead prosecutor on the case in Georgia, which is a
She's
state
the
case, which
district
a lot of
attorney who,
people, a district
well, no,
attorney, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's the one who heads the office, who headed up the investigation. She's accused of having an affair with the lead prosecutor in the case who was
Right.
hired. And they said that he used his money that he got from the state to go on trips with her, and that somehow that's you can't do that. And I'm going, you got paid the money. It's your money. Are you
Yeah.
doing the job? But she came
But
out
even
and said a lot of other things.
so, yeah, so because I watched her on she testified on, well, we're recording this on a Friday. She testified on the Thursday. She was sassy, and quite argumentative with the defendant judges who were pushing her. But
She didn't
I
even
mean
follow
that's
her own advice. If you listen to any attorney, they'll tell you when you get on the stand, you don't
keep
offer salute. If they
yep
ask you, did you do this? You go yes or no. You give them one
yeah
word answers. She was trying to outthink them where they were going, and therefore had to say, don't be cute with me, and I'm not on trial. This guy is. You don't have to say any of that. Just go, yep, nope, yep,
yep
nope, see ya. And then that's what she should have done, but she couldn't keep her mouth shut. She hurt herself and she hurt, her case. And look, whatever she did with that lead attorney has nothing to do with the facts in the Donald Trump case.
mm,
Absolutely nothing. Who she screwed, when she screwed, how she screwed, what she ate before she screwed, what ship she was on when they did it. Nobody gives a it. That has nothing to do with the case. But she came across, she played right into Donald Trump's hands.
yeah.
She created controversy where there didn't need to be any.
Well, especially as a strong black woman, and Megas is not exactly known for its strong black women, so it's playing right into the racial side of this as well, unfortunately,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
but it doesn't necessarily, even if she gets booted off the case, that doesn't mean that this case ends. It just means that another district attorney would take it over. But
Yeah,
then if it
and
moved, but then it
another
could get dropped
prosecutor.
by prosecutor. Another lawyer could drop it if they decide to.
Right. If they bring it, look, it doesn't mean that the case. What it will mean is a delay at the very least. If they
Right.
boot her, boot him, it'll be a delay, which is all Donald Trump wants. He wants a
Hmm.
delay, and eventually, hopefully, it will go away. And you're right; they could appoint someone else to prosecute the trial, and that person could look at it and go, "I'm not going to prosecute this."
Yeah.
And then it's done, and Donald Trump wins without ever. And it's sad because that's the one. What everyone needs to understand is that is the most important case being heard against Donald Trump because it's in the state of Georgia and it's
Hmm.
not a federal case. And so Donald Trump, even if he were reelected as president, could not stop his prosecution in Georgia.
Right.
Now, apparently, he can.
They've walked into that. But I mean, yeah, that's just, I mean, you're prosecuting a case, you're lonely, you're having to study Donald Trump all the time. You're there, you look across the papers and the forms, the candles
Yeah,
are lit. It's a romantic environment.
well, I know you're making light, but look, she was single. He was going through a messy divorce. The hell did they do?
Yeah.
You do spend a lot of, they say familiarity breeds contempt, but, oftentimes if you're not out dating and people have urges, I mean, you're together.
The
What the
way that you
hell?
just said that people have urges has made me never want to have an urge again. But that's
You had an urge.
stop.
Well, I'm telling you, tough room, I had an urge once.
Do not
My
use that as your
mother, she
bed.
wouldn't breastfeed me. She said, I don't know you like that. Anyway, sorry, but that's
So it reminds me you worked for Playboy all these years.
yeah, that's true. Never went to a bad Playboy party, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't talk about those anymore, I would imagine. Um, so I mean the case will go on potentially, but you're right. It could be slightly fucked at the moment, but it's not going to go away. I've been telling people here, what's great about Donald Trump being indicted this many times is you get to have your favorite indictment. And mine is the one that's going to trial first. I mean, even though probably it feels like in the seriousness levels, him paying hush money to the porn star, but it was to subvert the election. So it's core there. But what I love about it, and I explained to British audiences, is that what he's being tried for isn't paying hush money to the porn star. It's the fact that the way they accounted for the money. So the lesson is if you're going to pay money for a porn star, use cash.
or
That's
just
the
be
important
upfront
thing.
about it.
Yeah. Which he's not been shy about that. I mean, there's plenty of interviews over
No.
him over the years going, fuck everybody. I grab him by
Yeah.
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 He's never been shy. So yeah, and his supporters don't seem
Hey,
to
look, I
care.
paid off a porn star. Who cares?
Yeah.
That's all he had to say. And that issue would have been dropped.
His evangelical Christian supporters don't care. Um, do you do you think that it's true though that a conviction will matter to not the mega hardcore, but to the people who are like who both sides, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who both, the press that go, oh, they're both old and blah blah blah, that don't recognize one as a fascist.
Well, I think where it matters are in those 7 swing states.
Yeah.
I don't think the MAGA supporters care. In fact, some of them think it'd be great if he was convicted and still won. They would
Yeah.
really love that. That would be delicious irony for them if their guy won. But in those 7 swing states, and kept a I've kept those close to my heart. Or they are Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and Minnesota. In those 7 states where there are swing voters, it
Mm,
makes a difference. The
yeah.
fact that Donald Trump came out and said, our allies, if they don't pay their NATO bills, we would let Russia beat up our allies. That has traction in those states. There are
Mm,
people who understand that Russia is the enemy, and that and today, of course, what happened with Navalny, with Alexei Navalny, proves
mm,
that beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so that resonates with those voters in those 7 swing states. So Donald Trump, as much as his minions will continue, I mean, like I said, they'll be happy to support him. Even they think it would be delicious irony if
yeah.
their guy were in prison and elected president. They would love it. But for those of us in the real world and those on the fence who go, well, I kind of like the economy when Donnie was there, they're going to look at it and go, no. I mean, Mitch McConnell and some of the traditional Republicans are trying to fight against this. Nikki Haley is still in the battle against Donald Trump. But with all these plates spinning, I don't know that Donald Trump can overcome his own mouth at the end of the day.
Mm,
Everything that he's involved in is of his own doing. He likes to claim that he's a victim of circumstance, but he's not Curly in the Three Stooges either. He's
yeah.
Donald Trump. He engineered all of this and wants to get away with it, much like Putin has. And the more that that's made available for American voters to understand, the better off the electorate will be. And
Mm,
by consequence, the entire world.
yeah. But that's where I think that as people actually switch on to the reality of him being on the ballot, that they will see those are the kind of things that I'm counting on as somebody who doesn't want him to win, that they'll realize that, especially, well, it all comes down to winning those 7 states. Um, so what's the latest at the White House? Because I know that's your favorite haunt. Um,
Well,
is it
my
how?
latest there is Biden needs to get out in front. I've said this for 3 years. I
Yeah.
have every 2 months in the White House asked them to bring the president out more often. We weren't 6 months into this administration when I told Jen Psaki, who was at the time the press secretary, the one who speaks best for your policies is the president. We need to see him more often.
Mm,
They've never done it. So either they don't understand that appealing to social media and being on blogs and all that and podcasts isn't the equivalent of standing in front of a room full of contentious reporters and asking their questions. Either they don't understand the importance of that, or it's true that the president is mentally challenged, well, mentally incapacitated. And
yeah.
so that's I want to see more of Joe Biden. I have
Mm,
spent time around him. I don't think he's nearly as decrepit as Donald Trump is, but the rest of the world needs to see that, and you're not going to see that unless you put the president out in front of the press and let him answer questions every once in a while. He's had 2 press conferences, 2 full press
Jesus.
conferences in his entire time in the White House. One of them was during COVID, and I was there for the other one. And while he had a list of 10 questions, and he wouldn't take anybody that wasn't on those questions. And he goes, this is the list they gave me, folks. I've got to go by it. And I looked at him. I said, Mr. President, you're the president. You can call on anyone you want. And he smiled and he said, yeah, what's your question? So that's how I got mine in. So, but there needs to be more of him in front of us.
Mm,
And there was one time I said, look, every time I've been in front of him, he's answered a question. That's why you need one of my questions. That's why you need to put me in front of him. And they go, you don't understand. That's exactly why we don't want you in front of him. So that leads me to believe that there's a problem. And that's the biggest problem going on in the White House today. That and the fact that we got a bunch of kids as reporters in the White House who have no idea how to ask a question or what the hell they're doing there. But that's a different issue.
That's called a generational change, Brian, and these things happen.
No, it's called what it is. It's the consolidation of the media. And
Yeah.
there are 6 companies that own about 95% of what you see, read, or hear. And the change is dramatic just since the end of the Trump era. When I first walked into that briefing room, it was Sam Donaldson who told me, pay attention to that first row of seats, those 7 seats in a Brady briefing room. And it wasn't called the Brady briefing room then, but he said,
Hmm.
there's probably 200 years of experience there. And then he said, by the way, Helen Thomas has 190 of it, which was, but the point is, of course, is that there used to be a lot more experience in that room. In fact, you
Hmm.
had to have 5 to 10 years of experience before you got to be in the White House,
Yeah.
right? And sitting in one of those chairs. Now that front row, maybe 35, 40, 50 years of experience. And the thing is that the larger companies are cutting costs. So what costs more? A reporter with 10, 15 years of experience or a reporter fresh out of school? So you
Yeah.
hire the kid fresh out of school, give them the White House beat. They're enamored of the fact that they're in the White House. They chase access journalism. They know no better. And then after they have 5 or 6 years of experience, they boot them out and bring in somebody else cheap. That's the problem. And
Hmm.
so, as Ben Bagdikian said from the Washington Post many years ago, if you want diversity of coverage and diversity of thought, you have to have diversity of ownership. Those who scream that we have a liberal media in the United States do not understand the nature of the media in the United States. With 6 companies owning 95% of what you see, read, or hear, those large companies sitting on their board of directors are probably less than 100 people. And I guarantee you, none of them are liberal. If there's a bias in the media, it's towards money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the same problem here in the UK. It's not as visible on the TV press because of the rules here, but the print journalism is insanely right wing. And they're looking at selling, is it the Telegraph or the Spectator? I think Abu Dhabi's looking at buying it, which is, they're a bastion of liberal thought as well. Or one of those countries, I can't remember, but don't sue me, please, because we don't have very good libel protections in the UK. But you said that when you ask a question, that's what they're afraid of. But every time you've gotten a question into him, has he answered it in a way that
Yes.
was cogent? And did he trip up and embarrass himself? Did he do anything that you would say, oh my God, this guy is deficient?
He has looked tired on occasion. That's it. Let me explain something to
Okay.
you. For those who don't understand Joe Biden, he was called the human gaffe machine when he was vice president. The first time I ever asked him a question was 30 some odd years ago. I was covering a trial in Delaware where the deputy attorney general was accused of murder. And he had sexual peccadillos with numerous young ladies, including the one that he killed. He tried
Hmm.
to drag Tom Carper, who was then the governor of Delaware, into his den of iniquity, and then he tried to blame Carper and he tried to blame Biden, and none of it was true, right?
Hmm.
But I had to do my due diligence because I was writing a book. So I
Yeah.
showed up one day outside of the Senate chambers uh, while Biden was entertaining other reporters, and I asked him about Tom Capano, who was the
Hmm.
guy who was on trial. And for those who don't know, Tom Capano, look it up. He's the guy that was he was a bit of a pedophile too, and he also gave me a child rearing advice in a letter that he sent me from death row, and that's another story.
Oh
So,
my God.
so Biden's sitting there,
Did you bring that
and
out and show your kids every now and then and go, you
yeah,
see, better
yeah,
fucking listen to me?
so Biden is taking questions. I asked him about Tom Capano, and I can't remember what his entire answer was, but he said, I'm not even friends with Tom Soprano, which, The Sopranos was popular at the time.
Yeah.
And I laughed. I thought it was a good joke because there were many in Delaware who considered the Capanos, they thought they were the Sopranos, but there
Yeah.
were other reporters next to me going, just don't pay any attention. He's a gaffe machine. And I go, I thought he was making a joke, but it
Yeah.
turns out he is a gaffe machine. But and he's a stutterer.
Hmm.
But stuttering and making unavoidable gaffes like calling the president of Egypt the president of Mexico is not the same as telling me to inject Clorox and expose my innards to sunlight so I can cure COVID. That
Yeah.
or mistaking Nancy Pelosi for Nikki Haley. I mean, that's the mark of true onset of dementia.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Joe Biden, I haven't if I had seen it, I would say so. But I
Yeah.
have been around him as much as I was around Trump. I'll admit that, which is why I continually argue that we need to see Donald Trump less and we need to see Joe Biden more.
But you said you haven't been around Biden as much. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
not
No, no.
that's because he's they have, as I said, he's the best. When you were referencing what I said to them about, I should be in front of him more often.
Hmm.
They go, no, you shouldn't, because that's why we don't want you in front of him. But he's always, he knows me from 30 years ago, and why
Yeah.
we never sat down to break bread. I mean, I'm sure he just recognizes my ugly face and go, oh, that's a reporter I know. And so, he'll respect it. He does respect, the age.
Yeah.
So he'll answer my questions, and he's always been forthcoming, cogent, and honest in his responses. I may disagree with him. He may
Yeah.
tell me that something is none of my business, but I'm used to that. But raging against the dying of the light with incoherent psychobabble, that's Donald Trump. That's not
Yeah.
Joe Biden.
And it's because, when I talk to people here about it, even in the media or just personally, the narrative is that Biden is just clearly diminished. He's clearly diminished. He's clearly blah, blah, blah. And then I say, well, I speak to people like Brian who are in the room with him, have seen him, and you say what you say. And you are a person who calls out, I know you call out politicians, either side of the fence and everything else, even though, I know you're all warm and cuddly with Trump. But I
Yeah,
say
he's
that
my
knowing
best buddy.
you say, yeah, I would imagine the SEAL Team 6 thing, you'd probably be on that
Yeah,
list.
that's
Um,
I've been told.
so I know you got, but your fight is to call them, to call them out because that's your role as a journalist. And I know you believe in that passionately. So, but I've got journalists here who, are somewhat right-wingish who will be like, oh, clearly Biden's diminished. But that narrative is so powerful and strong, and it's just
And that's
everywhere.
because Biden doesn't come out and speak out against it. That's my whole gripe with this administration is it's their fault that that narrative exists. And they're not going to get rid of that narrative unless they put him out there more often. Now,
Hmm.
is he old? Yeah. There, there are people that are going, oh, come on. Biden isn't old. Well, he's 81. He's old.
Yeah,
Okay. Unless he lives to be 175, he's past middle age, folks. He's a senior citizen. And by the way, Donald Trump is an old fart too. And sometimes both of them remind me of the old guys who stand on the, you kids get off my lawn, that
yeah,
kind. But nonetheless, even that being said, Donald Trump is old and mentally incapacitated.
yeah,
What I've seen of Biden is that he's old, he has lost a step, but he's not a dementia problem. He is, I mean, he snapped back. Sometimes look, we're on the South Lawn the other night. He's Catholic. It's the time of Lent where you give things up. So he was asked, what are you going to give up for Lent? He didn't even miss a beat. He turned and he said, you guys. I mean, I'm going, oh, I'm telling you, he's doing his Rodney. Yeah, I'm going to give up you guys. So, I mean, that's not the mark of a guy with dementia. When Peter Ducey asked him, about that, he said, "Well, yeah, I guess I am forgetful. I let you speak."
yeah.
So I mean, he, he's made fun of his age.
Hmm.
He's made self-deprecating remarks but Donald Trump never will. Donald
No,
Trump is mentally incapacitated and physically not in good shape.
fingers crossed for that. But because the press conference, so it kind of got covered, like because everything happens so quickly now. So this week has been
Oh,
Donald
wore
Trump in
me out
court
this
and everything else. But a week and a half ago was the press conference that came after the special counsel's report that said that they weren't going to prosecute Biden for the documents that he took because he acted totally differently than Donald Trump did. He admitted, oops, I have these, answered questions, sat for 5 hours, everything else. The special prosecutor added all these details about Biden being an old man. So Biden comes out for a press conference. I don't think you were there for this one. Um,
No,
uh,
they wouldn't
yep.
see again. Good point. You're absolutely right. I wasn't there. You want to know why? Because they
Mm,
wouldn't let the full press in. They only allowed the pool to be there.
right.
The open press was not allowed there. I'm not in the press pool. Donald Trump would have opened that up, stood on the on the south lawn or in the
Yep.
rose garden or in the east room and shouted and screamed and argued and called on all of us as he did so. As much as I disagree with Donald Trump and think he's a turd, at the same time, he loves the attention. I'm a turd. Talk to me.
Yep.
And I can't fault him. I can't fault Donald Trump for that. I can fault Donald Trump for what he's done and what he said, but I can't
Mm,
fault Donald Trump for showing up. I fault Joe Biden for not. Go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, because that press conference was widely perceived as a disaster for Biden, partly because at the end when he mixed up Mexico and Egypt, but for the
If he
rest of
had,
it, he got if that because there's I think it's on the Daily Show was it that did a bit about him starting to leave and then coming
if
back and be
he
like
had
no 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 no
just,
no 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 no
yeah,
just go
yeah.
go 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 I think it was
He
Daily
made an
Show, but
excellent point when the one reporter, and this is why I have fault with us. That was a
mm,
stupid question that
so
was
was that the
asked
one that
of
made
him.
him angry about
Yeah,
his age?
about it, and he said no. Basically, that's your judgment, or in other words, your opinion. She didn't
Yeah,
ask a question; she
yeah.
proposed an opinion, and
Mm,
he was right to say that's your judgment, not that of the press, and he walked off. At that point in time, yeah, he should have
should have
just
kept
said,
going.
"I cut." He would have won. That's it. He showed up. He was vigorous, and look, his best moment in that press conference, by the way, was when, and this is what got me as a father, when he talked about his son and how, and he said, "How dare they ask me that question?" And he
Mm,
seethed, his teeth, you could see it. He was angry. Uh, I, I, I felt empathy for him at that point in time. He'd lost a son,
yeah.
and how dare they think that he doesn't know when his son died? I get
Hmm.
all of that. That would make me angry too. And then he screwed it up by, calling the president of Egypt, the president of Mexico. And then he came out to prove he was mentally there, and then it looked like he mentally wasn't there. But again, those are the gaffes that are, if you've covered him, that's not anything beyond what we've seen before out of Joe Biden. The thing is to make people understand that he needs to be in front of us more often. So people
Yeah.
go, "Oh, that's just Joe being Joe." Those of us who've been around him and have seen him and have been in scrums with him on Capitol Hill when he's put his hand on your shoulder and go, "Oh, Brian, I meant that's not what I meant. Here's what I really meant."
Mm,
That's Joe Biden.
yeah.
And that we need to see more of so people understand. Now, you're never going to convince the multitude of people that will cheer for Donald Trump even if he's in prison. But
Yeah.
those 7 states that I talked about that are the swing states, you're going to reach those voters there.
Yeah. I agree. And that seems to be the message in the people I've been talking to on the pod. They need to see Joe. He needs to get ahead of this. But do you think he's now, it seems, but his strategy on some of the things, like some of the legislative things, because he is a legislator probably in his DNA, that some of the deals that he's come out with, there's been a couple times, I'm trying to think which one it was, but it was one of the things that ended up being a bipartisan success. Maybe it was the infrastructure
The
bill,
infrastructure
but they,
bill,
but they were like,
$1.1
where,
trillion dollars.
but when it was happening, there was a lot of where's Biden, where's Biden? And then he came out at the end and he had been part of it the whole time. At
Yeah.
the beginning of the Israeli thing, he was behind the scenes. And obviously that's gone in some different directions. But and he's done it. So it's his tendency as an administrator seems to be not to step out in front and grab all the limelight. But that's now hurting him as a presidential figure and as a candidate.
And I don't think anybody on his team gets that. For example, the biggest mistake he said, "What's the most unifying event in America?" And by the way, now worldwide, the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He could have taken 5 or 10 minutes, sat down and talked with us during the Super Bowl or prior to the Super Bowl. And he missed a golden opportunity and he needed to take it. And by the way, one on one with one reporter doing that is not nearly as contentious
No.
as, being in front of the entire press corps or even the press pool.
Yep.
That would have been an opportunity and it'll never come back for him again until the next Super Bowl when he may not even be president. So that was a
Yeah.
golden opportunity, scuttled, fumbled, and if, in the terms of of football, a loss of possession.
But what I mean, what because that would have been CBS because they had the Super Bowl this year, so
Yeah,
that would have been one of their. I don't know who do you think would have drawn the straw for an interview like that?
it could have been anyone. My God, they could have
Yeah.
brought Dan Rather out of retirement to do it. I mean, they could have had Scott Pelley. They could have had Anderson Cooper, who's on
Mm.
60 Minutes. They could have had a number of people interview him. That
Yeah, it's not like it would
it
have been Fox News, which I think. But didn't Obama go on Fox News post Super Bowl
See, and I've got no
1 year?
problem with going on Fox News. I think you don't preach to the converted.
Yeah,
They're already for you. You preach
yeah.
to the people that don't like you and go, hey, give me a shot. I'm not such a bad guy.
Mm.
Listen to what I'm saying. And, Fox News would eat that up if he went on. It would be
Yeah.
ratings gold for them. And it would be ratings gold for the White House. People are going to think what they're going to think no matter what you do. You might as well put your best foot forward and get the most you can out of it. Like P.T. Barnum said, suckers born every minute, and there's no such thing as bad PR. Get out there and do it. That's and I get tired of people going, well, I really love Biden. That's not his job. He's doing his job. No, he's the president of the United States. Part of his job is speaking to the American public. So
Yeah.
shut up and let him talk.
I love how subtle you are with some of your statements. It's just such a nuanced, finely tuned argument
Well, it
that
takes
you
a
can't.
while.
Right. I need to let you go soon. I guess how do you think things are going to go for Mike Johnson? So for people who don't know, Mike Johnson is now the Speaker of the
Who?
House in the House of Representatives, which is like the Commons. But unlike House of Lords in the UK, the Senate is actually democratically elected. But anyway, um,
The
I mean,
House is, yeah, House and
yeah,
Senate are democratically elected,
yeah.
supposedly.
So it's like the Commons, but yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
But I mean, he seems like he's going to leave. Well, the House is going away, I think, for President's Day holiday for like a week now. But when they come back, there's a very good chance that the government will shut down because they haven't figured out the spending budget. I mean, it's just fucked in the House, isn't
Well, what's funny is people are now going, gosh, Kevin McCarthy wasn't that bad. That's
And I don't
so
know, he seems like a real asshole, Kevin McCarthy. Did you
Kevin
interact with him at
McCarthy is
all?
one of, yeah, I've known him for years. And the best thing I can say about Kevin McCarthy, the best thing I could say about Kevin McCarthy is uh my whisk broom at home has more common sense. I mean, he's a dullard and he's dumb. But with
Yeah.
that being said, he's not malevolent as Mike Johnson. And
Mm.
but even that, Mike Johnson isn't that bright. I mean, he's destined to be a blip in the road. He's going to be a footnote in history. He could lose all it would take is 5 or 6 Republicans tired of him and the entire Democrats, which would vote him out, to get rid of
Yep.
him. At the best he can hope for is to stick around through the next election, because it's looking increasingly like the Democrats will take back the House, and then he wouldn't be the Speaker of the House. By the way, that's you got to love Donald Trump for this. Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, has said, if she's the co-chairman of the RNC, that every cent spent will be on Donald Trump, which still won't, pay off his massive legal bills. But at the same time, it will probably bankrupt the Republican Party. But the important part for Republicans is the fact that if every cent is spent on Donald Trump, what about the down ballot Republicans who
Yep.
count on the money to run for office in those purple states in contested elections? They're screwed. So he's for the Democrats are going, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Put Laura in there, take all the money. Yay, you go, girl. That's where they're at. So
Yep.
at the end of the day, Mike Johnson is flotsam. I mean, there's more DNA on the bottom of my shoe from what I stepped in this morning than in Mike Johnson. So I think he's destined for irrelevance.
But he's very charming. He seems very charming. The all shucks thing when he comes out and it's like, oh,
I
just,
don't
I
find him
just want
charming.
to.
I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I barely am. But it's Eddie Haskell in Leave It to Beaver.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hi, Mr. Cleaver.
Yeah.
That faux, yeah, and he doesn't. No one buys it. Not Matt Gaetz doesn't buy it, and he's
Yeah.
votes with him. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she'll buy anything, so don't use her. And Lauren Boebert's too busy trying to buy people off for what she did in a theater. So, the morons are going to be the morons, but the rest of us know that Mike Johnson is about appeasing or appealing as cat vomit.
Just, I've seen some cats eat cat vomit.
Yeah, I've
So
seen dogs eat their own poo. That doesn't mean I want them around either.
that's true. I want to ask you about, of course, I know you're writing for Salon, you've got your podcast. In your writings, is there anything that you've covered um, that people aren't looking out? I mean, it seems like people, we know that there's going to be an issue about Biden's age. We know Trump's got his indictments and the trials coming. Is there anything that's happening that's kind of bubbling along that you think people aren't talking about?
Yeah, there's two things. And one was what I mentioned at the beginning, the Russian hegemony
Mm,
and the fact that we are at war in two very contentious places on the planet. We're not looking too close at the Middle East, and we keep being told we're not escalating the problems there, that we're trying to de-escalate them by firing weapons, which makes no sense. That's just a
yeah.
bad lie. That situation has escalated. We don't have boots on the ground. Hopefully we never will, but we do have boots in the air and boots at sea. And we are involved in a fighting, you call it a conflict, call it a war, call it what you will, but we're there. And Ukraine has to be supported, and we kind of gloss over that on many occasions. But the big thing, as far as my uh, way of making a living goes, is look, man, the First Amendment, my profession is under fire, and
Mm,
it is by government, and it is Donald Trump and his ilk, and it's the Democrats as well. And so, unless we change how we do business in this country, the rise of global hegemony and despotism is only going to get worse. The far right is surging in many places and in many countries, supported by the likes of Donald Trump.
mm,
Not necessarily on purpose, because Donald really doesn't have an ideology. It's all about Don staying out of
yeah.
jail and making money. But for the rest of the despots in the world, they look to him and see what he's done successfully and are applying it in their third world and second world countries.
Mm. Well, there's a positive end to the conversation.
Well, the
Tell me about
positive end is they're still making good Kentucky bourbon, so I'm okay.
exactly. We can medicate our way through these things. You've got a third pressing of your book. Is that right? Tell us about your book.
Yeah, the name of the book is called Free the Press, and it's about the problems of the First Amendment and how the press has been consolidated. I always succinctly look at it this way: there are twice the number of people on this planet as on the day that I was born, and there's only a quarter a number of reporters. So we're
Hmm,
going in the wrong direction with reporting in the First Amendment. And that's Free the Press. You can find it wherever fine books are sold.
brilliant stuff. And I know you've got your podcast as well, which is
Just ask
that's
the question.
weekly. Just ask the
Yeah.
question, which is almost as good as this podcast, right?
Well, we do two
Almost.
editions of it. We do Just Ask the Question, which is about, we talk to one person like you're doing here
Yeah.
and interview them. And that comes from politics and entertainment. And then we do a Just Ask the Question podcast called Just Ask the Press, which is a
Right.
Sunday roundup of the news of the week. And with that, we have former federal prosecutor Michael Zeldin and editor at large from CQ Roll Call, John Bennett, as we discuss the news of the week and try to make sense of it, particularly, how we've covered it, which often sucks.
Which is a good endorsement as well of your work.
Yeah.
Um, well, thank you. It's always nice to get that perspective of being in the room with some of these people. So I always really appreciate that. And thanks again for coming on.
Well, no problem, Eric. And I'll just say to the other people in the room, some of you need to bathe. That other than that, we're all good.
So there you go. That was Brian. Again, he's great is finding out what it is like to ask Biden questions and how Biden responds. And the resounding message for anyone who's been listening to previous episodes of this podcast, the message is get Biden out there. That's what they need to do if they want Biden to be able to communicate and overcome this narrative that he doesn't know what time it is, doesn't know what's happening, doesn't know what's going on in the world, where we've also got this other old guy who definitely doesn't know what's going on in the world and is also a wannabe fascist. So two different candidates are running in the election. But having Brian talk about, you know, what he sees when he's actually in the White House, speaking to the president, speaking to the people around the president, is always an invaluable peek behind the curtain that I just love. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about these conversations and getting to do this podcast and sharing it with you, good listener and viewer, now that we're on YouTube as well. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Brian for coming back on. Make sure to check out his articles in Salon. Make sure to check out his book, Free the Press. Make sure to check out his podcast, which, you know, is pretty good as well. About Just Ask the Question, and also, of course, do all the subscribing and liking and reviewing of this fine thing that you've just listened to. I almost said fine kettle of fish. That's not quite what I'm going for, but you know what I mean. So thank you again for listening. We'll be back again next week, and that's it for now. Bye-bye.